Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, May 12th, 2020, Montgomery County Council meeting. The first item that we have, we're going to ask Council Member Navarro to please tell us about her hero.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today, I would like to honor those who have played an outsized role during this pandemic. I want to salute the brave souls who turn on the lights at dawn and turn them off come night. Those who are growing, picking, and selling the food we eat, the ones who are out there battling to save our lives. I'm talking about our grocery store clerks, farm workers, bus drivers, delivery workers, childcare providers, trash collectors, custodial workers, all those who are in the battlefront saving lives as health aides, nurses, and counselors in hospitals, rehabilitation centers, nursing homes, and group homes for our most vulnerable. It is right for us to honor them as we battle this crisis. Ever since the COVID-19 pandemic broke out, I have found myself thinking a lot about the power of names and of narrative, and how the power dynamics of relationships shift in times of crises. I keep thinking about how they are out there risking their lives for us. Far beyond video conferences and telework, many do not have time to talk to us about their challenges because they are too busy and overwhelmed in the front lines, battling the invisible enemy. They themselves are hidden in plain sight. We see them, but do we actually see them? Who are they? Well, they tend to be immigrants, people of color, people with dreams and dedication to their communities, but people who continue to be an afterthought or a convenient political target. Yet here we all are, relying on them for our very own survival. Many of these brave souls are falling in the line of duty, falling really sick and too scared to seek help. It is personal to me as a community leader. We know now that the zip codes in my district, 20902 to 0904 to 0906, have been hard hit by this pandemic. We know that these zip codes are home to the largest concentration of Black and Latino residents. They may not have recognizable names or titles, but their dedication and sacrifice demand that we shift the narrative once and for all and see them for who they are, our heroes in plain sight. So next time you go to the grocery store, or someone delivers a package to your home, or you pick up dinner from your favorite restaurant, or you see a nurse aide, a bus driver, a custodian, a trash collector, take the time to say thank you. And from now on, let's see each and every one of them for who they are, dedicated community servants, also known as our community heroes.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, do we have any announcements, changes to the agenda, or petitions?
Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. The Council has not received any petitions, but there are some calendar changes. For the addendum, the Council has added at 1.5 at 1:20 on the consent calendar, an introduction, resolution to approve FY21 system development charge. Action is tentatively scheduled for May 13th, 2020. Council has also added a work session at 1:45, the FY21 operating budget. Item 4, FY21 budget update and status report, FY21 continuity of services revenue and expenditures changes, fiscal policy update, review of potential council changes to continuity of services, and finally, review of expenditures for potential federal funding. That is all, Council President.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. The minutes have been distributed for March 31st, 2020, and the approval of the closed session minutes of April 7th, April 14th, and April 21st, 2020. Unless there are any corrections, they will be approved as received. The next item that we have is our consent calendar, and we need a motion to approve our consent calendar.
So moved. Second.
It was moved by Councilmember Reamer and seconded by Councilmember Gladys. Maybe didn't even speak. I don't know. And seconded by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Yes. Nobody's going to raise their hand? Okay. Thank you. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, it carries unanimously by those present. We'll check with Councilmember Hooker when he gets here if he wanted to approve it as well. The next item that we have is public hearings. The first one is agenda item number 2, and this is a public hearing on a special appropriation to Montgomery County Public Schools, MCPS, FY20 operating budget in the amount of $303,094 for the Comprehensive Schools Safety Initiative Program grant. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. Each individual will have 2 minutes to speak. Individuals will be alerted as they approach their 2 minutes and may be disconnected. It is my understanding there are no speakers for this hearing, and I believe that's correct, unless someone corrects that. This public hearing is now closed, and we need a motion.
So moved, Mr. President.
Second.
It was moved by
moved.
It was moved by Councilmember Rice, seconded by Councilmember Navarro. I see no. Okay. I see no speakers. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed, and that carries unanimously by those present. The next item is agenda item number 3. This is a public hearing on a special appropriation to MCPS FY20 operating budget in the amount of $962,000 for the Striving Readers Comprehensive Literacy Grant. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. It is my understanding there are no speakers for this hearing. This hearing is now closed. Councilmember Rice, would you like to make a motion, please?
So moved. So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you. It's been moved by Councilmember Rice. Is there a second?
Second.
It was seconded by Councilmember Navarro. No speakers that I can see. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously by those members present. This concludes our public hearings. The next item that we have is an update on the FY21 budget update and status report. And I guess Mr. Howard or Ms. Michelson, are you going to lead this off? Who's leading this off?
Yes, it will be me.
Okay.
I want to start out by saying that this is a snapshot of where we were as of yesterday afternoon on the budget. We will continue to have a few more tweaks, both because the council has some agenda items tomorrow you'll discuss that may change this, and staff, now that we have a final tracking sheet in hand, is going through this looking for any corrections and changes. So I need to start out saying that there's both bad news and good news, and I'll start with the bad news. I would be remiss in not reminding you that this coming fiscal year is probably going to look a lot worse than it does, than what we're experiencing right now. And we've already given you estimates of potential revenue write-downs for the coming year. And I think all of the decisions that follow need to be made with that context as background. Unfortunately, I can't tell you that the estimates we gave you in April, where we projected significant write-downs in revenues, that has not changed. We still believe that to be the case. And in fact, the likelihood of this being a very rapid recovery seems to have been diminished. So we need to be cautious. The other potentially negative, we don't quite know yet, is we don't have the wrap up yet on the FY20 revenues and expenditures. And so there could continue to be some decreases in this area. At this point, from what we're learning from finance, it's not measurable, but again, there will be some, final adjustments ahead. So now let me move on to the good news, since I started with the bad. The good news is the council set out an objective of having a continuity of services budget. You've done your review of almost every element of that, a couple of more small things to go, and grants tomorrow. You were exceedingly disciplined in your review, and I think accomplished your objective. It enabled you to write down resources by not approving some of the two tax increases recommended by the executive, or is his alternative method of calculating the charter limit. And that ended up being a significant reduction in the revenues available, but you were also able to make very significant reductions in expenditures by following the continuity of services model that you had laid out right at the beginning of this process. So I want to take you to first talk a little bit about the tracking sheets, which you have here. And as you'll see from the tracking sheets, they show 71.6 million in reductions, but also approximately 2.2 million that you'll be considering shortly in terms of potential additions. The council also chose to reduce the resources by 72.6 million with adjustments from transfers, both from the Housing Initiative Fund and the Alcohol Beverages Services of 6.2 million. You asked staff to look at CARES Act funding and identified some specific items that you asked staff to consider whether they would be eligible for CARES Act funding. And we have a team of people in both the executive and council that have been reviewing CARES Act, the details of the CARES Act and eligibility. And we did review the 4 requests that you had. And our determination was that we really shouldn't be using CARES Act funding for full-time positions that are expected to continue beyond the length of this crisis. Similarly, because all of the funding needs to be expended by the end of December, we should not use it for non-personal items that are also expected to be ongoing. So with that, we looked at the 4 requests that the council made and believed that one appears to be eligible, and that was additional contractual services in the county attorney's office to help with the surge of cases that they believe will happen as soon as the court reopens. That'll likely be reopening sometime between June and September, and they're hoping that that surge will end approximately around the end of the year when the CARES Act funding is no longer available for expenditures. So that did appear to be a very clear match. That item is only $110,000. There were 3 other things you asked us to look at: the new security grants for faith-based organizations, a new investigator in the Office of Human Rights, and 20 paramedic training positions. And again, either because these were full-time positions or because we believed your intent was to continue this beyond December, we would not recommend using CARES funding now. But we will come back to whether you nonetheless want to fund them in this budget. Also in your packet for today is a fiscal summary on the last 2 pages, which show all the puts and takes that I described a little bit earlier. The one thing I do want to highlight, which may stand out to you, is that at the very bottom of page 12, it shows reserves at 10.2%, which sounds pretty positive. The reason for the increase over the 10% is by reducing the resources, you've effectively changed the ratio. So the base on which we calculate reserves is now smaller, so the amount we allocated looks a little bit higher than it was. But basically, we're still in we're in okay shape right now on reserves. And we will obviously have to revisit it when we come back to the budget, either early in the fiscal year, whether that be summer or early fall. The final thing I want to bring to your attention is the potential additions that you asked be considered for the budget. And going back to my grim news at the beginning of this, I just want to remind you, as you consider these additions, that we're still believing that you will have to make significant reductions in FY21. And so the only thing that staff recommends be added now are things that you think are clearly such high priorities that even if you need to make reductions in the future, these would still be at the top of the list. I also want to remind you that you did identify a number of things that you hope to fund in FY21, including some very significant adjustments to the HHS budget. And so you want to be as restrained as possible to enable you to support some of those FY21 expenditures that you're hoping to make. With that, if you turn your attention to page 3 of the memo, it lists each of the potential additions to the tax-supported budgets. Previously, the council said you wanted to go through those one by one and vote on each one of those items. So I think I'll turn it back to the council president to go through these items and have colleagues provide input and vote on these. But I'll stop now too to see if there's any questions on anything I've said thus far.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Jawando has a question, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you, Marlene and staff, for pulling this together in a comprehensive way quickly. Two questions. One related to the reserves. If I'm reading it correctly, 500. I understood your adjustment because you said we have, reduced the pot so the percentage goes up. But as far as actual dollars, it's 553,800,000. I'm reading that correctly, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Jean Smith to answer that. Who's keeping track of all the numbers for us?
Great.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Okay, good. I like when I'm clear on it. And second question, whoever wants to answer, we had several of us have had briefings about what in the CARES Act funding, the $183 million that we've gotten from the federal government, of what we've already appropriated can be used because it's COVID related, even though we had initially said, hey, these things are so important, whether we have to go into reserves or not, we will. Could you explain the relationship? My understanding is that the vast majority of that money will be used some of those programs like the FEG, for example, or not the FEG, like the HHS and the hospital money will be coming out of that $183 million. Could you talk about the relationship between that in the reserves and what we've been able to, of the 40 or so million that we've already supplementally appropriated, what's going to come out of reserve versus, if any, versus the federal government money?
Yeah, that's a very good question. At this moment in time, we are assuming that all of the special appropriations can be funded by the CARES Act. And there are some nuances and questions that have been raised. So, it is possible that there may need to be some adjustments. And I also want to let you know that the executive branch is very carefully looking at other funding alternatives as well, such as FEMA funding. So when I say it could come out of CARES Act, it may be some other federal source. But right now, the reserve assumption is that none of these special appropriations need to be funded by the general fund. And we will obviously let you know if there's any change in that determination, but that is our standing assumption for now.
Okay, and so that would leave available the reserves for other potential funding down the line. Obviously, we all want to get more federal funding to help us so we can keep the reserves where they are, but okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thanks. Well, my question is, does the executive branch plan to send a savings plan? We're approving a budget here that does not account for any projected loss of revenue. It actually, it's balanced now, although it was not submitted to us as a balanced budget due to the $10 million, appropriation of a negative dollars. But setting that aside, it's balanced now only theoretically. But we know that revenues are going to decline somewhat, and we have not accounted for any decline of revenue. We've only matched our expenditures to a budget without a tax increase or without several tax increases. So is the executive branch available at the moment? Are they on the Zoom? We'll find out more about their plan.
I don't see that any of them are there right now, although I'll ask one of my colleagues to see if we can get somebody to sign in case there are further questions. However, it is our presumption that they will need to submit a savings plan unless, and the optimistic unless is that there's such significant federal funding in future federal programs that they can, wipe out any drop in revenues. And I will be the last one to predict the likelihood of that happening. I'll let you make your own predictions. I guess my assumption at this moment in time is that it will not be sufficient and that we will need a savings plan at some point.
Yeah, because just to be clear, all of the additional funding that we've appropriated recently for important response initiatives are in addition to this budget that we're approving right now. They're not accounted for in this budget.
That's correct.
And they will be paid for, we anticipate, by the federal funding that's been made available to us. So, we need to receive a savings plan from the executive branch, or else we have no, we're just kicking the can down the road, and it will be very problematic towards the end of the year. We'll end up having to make some very drastic changes rather than having planned for a reduction of revenue right from the beginning. I guess that's my fundamental question is, are we gonna start planning now for a reduction of revenue from this COVID emergency or not? And the only way for us to do that is to get a planning process going via a savings plan from the county executive. And I'm just concerned that we won't get one actually.
And I do want to emphasize what council staff told you earlier, which is we think the message from the council at this moment in time needs to be that every department needs to be as fiscally conservative as possible in advance of a formal savings plan. A formal savings plan sort of codifies ways to, reduce expenditures in a department, but that doesn't mean that departments cannot at least begin to make that effort and be cautious. And certainly if it's dramatic reductions, we'd need to do that through a formal savings plan as well.
Yeah, it's one thing for us to say that here, but really what puts that into effect is when OMB sends a memo to the departments saying, please tell us how you're going to save 1% or 2% or 3% this year. So I just want to, call attention to the elephant in the room, which is we have not yet received a clear statement from the executive branch that they will send a savings plan. So I don't know what to make of that. Quick question about OPEB. Can you just share with us what our funding level is for OPEB in this?
Craig, do you want to address that?
Yeah, sure. So the funding levels for OPEB assumes the executive's recommendation, which is in line with the actuarially determined contribution.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize. I was told that my bandwidth seems to be a little slow. Got kids here doing their work as well, so if I sound really, really slow, let me know. First of all, thank you to the staff for tracking all of this. I want to also thank my colleagues. This has definitely been an interesting budget process. We literally had to deconstruct the budget that we received. I don't think I ever recall a time when we've had to do that under very, very stressful circumstances. But I think that we see the light at the end of the tunnel, that this was a very important approach. So I want to, state that. I also wanted to say that regarding the reserves, I'm really pleased that we're at this level. especially because we have no idea, especially for FY22, what we're going to face. Right now, this is about mitigating as much as possible the impact that we know will be coming. And so I believe that if we're able to wrap up this budget with a healthy reserve level, we are positioning ourselves in a very solid space. It's very important. There are so many moving pieces right now that I know I will be able to rest easier at night if I know that we have a healthy level of reserves, as well as, of course, strategically using whatever federal funding we are receiving. Again, one thing is the crisis that we're dealing with right now. Another one is going to be this issue of recovery. And there are so many folks who right now are just devastated by this crisis that we're going to have to do a lot coming out of it to help them out. So again, I'm sure we're all, at least I feel like it's just been a whirlwind, but I think thus far, this particular packet illustrates that the quick, action of the council to set forth this framework is one that is allowing us to do a lot for those folks out there who are suffering. And let's not forget that we have had to step up to provide support to a lot of residents that in the past may had never really asked us for help. And so that has put immense pressure on our resources, and therefore the strategic direction that we've taken, in my opinion, has been very responsible. So thank you again. Just really wanted to commend everybody for everything that everybody has done to this point.
Thank you, and I certainly second that. Council Vice President Hucker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I absolutely agree with what Councilmember Navarro just said. I appreciate this is going to be a memorable budget season, and I know we're not nearly done with it, but I think we can see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's, I think, due to the strong guidance we had to adopt the continuity of service framework in the beginning. I wanted to raise one thing that I don't remember us discussing, but and I don't see it on the list here, and that's the fact that especially our large municipalities are providing an awful lot of the COVID-related services that the county is providing as well. And I know the council president and I who represent 3 of the large jurisdictions have talked to them some about how we would figure out how to reconcile the services that they're providing to their constituents in a way that because they're doing that, we don't have to do it from the county. I asked Tacoma Park at least to give me a sort of letter outlining many of the things that they're doing, and they track closely many of the things that, of course, we're doing and will be expecting to take out of the CARES Act funding, including communication of public health guidance to keep our residents safe and help them understand Dr. Gales' guidelines, acquisition of PPE, disinfection of public facilities, hazard pay, technological improvements for remote work, and emergency assistance, and some small business grants. So that's an issue, not just in Tacoma Park, but I know those are issues our other municipalities share as well. And I just wanted to put that on the table in this group so we could talk about how we want to make them whole. Mr. President, feel free, obviously, to jump in since I know you've thought about this.
And thank you. There's also, it's my understanding there's a little, and we need to figure out how we can do it, but it's my understanding, I believe that it's FEMA money that can also could be used for some of this. And the larger municipalities, any municipality with 50,000 people or more, I believe is the threshold number, goes directly to FEMA, whereas the others obviously have to come through us to go through FEMA.
Right.
Tacoma Park being one that does not have a 50,000 person population. So it's not a one size fits all, but we do need to figure out if they should be being reimbursed, we should certainly make certain that they're reimbursed fairly. So anyhow, we're going to have to figure that out.
Yeah, if I can just address that, what the executive branch is doing is they are carving out some portion of the funding that we've received to be able to reimburse municipalities for certain expenditures, and they are also offering to provide technical assistance to municipalities to be able to apply for FEMA grants and help them get other sources of funding. So they are working on that right now.
Good. I was hoping you'd say that, Marlene, and I hope you and our staff can help us track that moving forward so they feel at the end of this process like they've been treated fairly. On the one hand, they're out there offering these services, and I completely understand how in larger municipalities that have a landlord-tenant office like Tacoma Park or their own police like Tacoma Park and Rockville and Gaithersburg, that tenants would be seeking out their local office and not going through DHCA and the executive branch for the kind of grants that we've been able to put out at the county level. So I hope we can track that. You can help us make them whole at the end.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Hucker, or Vice President Hucker, while you're here, did you want to announce any votes?
Well, I apologize that I was delayed getting to the meeting. So yeah, I'd like to be recorded in the affirmative for the consent calendar and items 2 and 3 with your indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I had a feeling that might happen. Councilmember Glass, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to staff for this diligent update. It's important to see what we've been doing over the last number of weeks, and I applaud everyone's efforts to hold the line and to get ready for what's coming, because regarding the budget, we see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we know that a fiscal cliff is ahead of us. And that's the precarious position that we are in. And so my guiding light as we wrap up these deliberations and look into FY21 or enter FY21 is to ensure that our social safety net is strong for our most vulnerable residents, and also to be able to maintain our incredible workforce and not have to have any layoffs or furloughs. And we all have been talking about that, and I'm resolute in making sure those two ideals are held firm as we move forward. And so we need to continue being resolute in our same services budget, recognizing that the budget that we will have approved will likely need changes. And to all of our constituents, we're holding hands together. We're trying to ensure everybody's safety and health and the same level of services, but the future is a little unknown. And so to that point, I echo some of the sentiments that have been shared, that I do hope that the county executive and his team do send over some budget adjustments. We're wrapping up this budget, and we're not quite sure what FY21 is going to look like, but we need to talk about it. And we need to talk about it now. And so that's an important conversation that will be had. But again, thank you to the staff for going through this budget in this new format, which I know hasn't been an easy task. Following the bouncing ball is hard to do when we're in the council chambers, and it's even harder to do virtually. And so I just want to thank all the hard work that our staff has put into this update and to all the work over the last few weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albernoz.
Thank you, Mr. President. I echo all the comments of my colleagues just now. It's tough for staff to put together a budget, even in the best of times. When you think about the limited amount of time that they have in order to process literally thousands of pages of information within each respective department, it's really, truly amazing that in less than 2 months, and in many ways, you guys make it look easy, but we know it is not. And so I want to start from that place and expressing my appreciation to all the county council central staff, but also the staff on the executive branch that have worked so hard to put these budgets together in a way, given all of these unique challenges and unknowns, to be able to put something together that I think makes sense and is reasonable and is balanced and takes into account a lot of what has transpired to date. But I am, like so many of my colleagues, already starting to think about tomorrow. And I remember when I was at Recreation, we started out, we had to scrap our budget. You know, when you get a memo saying you have to cut 28%, you know, you just have to start all over again. And so what we did was we started with a zero-based budget, and we created an internal tracking system and a scoring mechanism of 1 through 5. And we used that, and it was unique to Recreation. You know, it can't be a one-size-fits-all. But that guide helped us as we went through those extraordinarily difficult decisions and got us to a place that was never going to be perfect, but I think was better than it otherwise would have been. And we used, you know, within that guide, those principles. I think we're going to need a similar tool moving forward, because as we heard this morning in testimony from Dr. Fauci, there is significant concern that we're going to get a bounce back from the pandemic because some are not here in Maryland and not here regionally, but across the country, there are some states that are rushing to open and really doing it recklessly, quite frankly. And we would hope that, and that impacts everybody. And so while we're doing everything we can here in the state of Maryland and everything we can in Montgomery County, and have been adhering to policies and practices that have been recommended by our public health officials, I am deeply concerned that the pandemic has obviously never gone away and has just, it's still continuing to increase, just at the not at the same rate it was before. And so I think as we develop this guide moving forward, we've said from the very beginning that public health and public safety was going to drive much of our decision making. And so as we establish these categories, that's obviously going to be a tier 1, and we will have to make decisions in that regard, in addition to helping with economic challenges and the social safety net. All these things are connected. But I think that it's going to be important for us to establish some metric like that moving forward that will help guide us in the coming weeks and months. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you. I also echo all the comments of colleagues. Really appreciate this process. It has been very challenging and a lot of time and effort and stress, but I think at a time when we are farther apart, we've come closer together to be able to figure out a way to get through this challenge. I think the council has really demonstrated itself really well in taking the mantle of leadership in the county and in pushing forward the budget that we need for the moment that we're in, and prepared to make the difficult choices and provide the needed resources and services moving forward, which isn't going to be easy. And we recognize that this is just the beginning of this process. I think everybody brought to bear their individual skills and talents and backgrounds, and it really helped to make this process work. And I'm very appreciative of that. And as was echoed before, for the staff that is smaller than what it was asked to do, and took on more responsibilities, not just in the budget, but also in some of the executive functions of this crisis, of really taking an active role. Really appreciate the tireless work and effort and energy and effectiveness that was put forward. It really has been amazing to watch. I'm really proud of the fact that this time of crisis, we stepped up and held the line on property taxes, and were able to figure out how to make that happen in a balanced approach, which was not easy, but we have appeared to have accomplished that. We're not done yet. We have some tough choices still to make, but as was mentioned earlier, we can see the light to a certain extent at the end of the tunnel, which is encouraging, and was somewhat overwhelming at first when we started this process, and we're getting towards the end, which is reassuring. And to Councilmember Hucker's point, some of us have been briefed. I know that different council members are being briefed at different moments, but the municipal funding and the participation with the municipalities was specifically discussed and has been raised, and I've mentioned it as well to the executive branch. And I know we're going to move forward as I have some of a wide range of municipalities in District 1, varying in the municipal authority that they have, and the challenges that they face, and the eligibility for funding. We've been on regular weekly calls with those municipalities. I share that. I could sort of appreciate you raising that, Councilmember Hucker, and appreciate the fact that I think the executive branch is well aware of those issues. We've talked through it and actually asked for not only clarity for us to be able to communicate with our municipal partners and for them, but also some, as you heard from Ms. Michelson, some technical expertise to be able to help them with FEMA and the CARES funding to understand what is reimbursable and what isn't. Like we need some expertise from those with greater resources than us. I think we can provide some expertise to them with smaller staffs and resources, and so I look forward to that as well. So really proud of the work that we've done so far. Appreciate the fact that we are nearing the end of this significant process, and just am extremely proud of this group and this council, and to call each of you colleagues to be able to work through this process together.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I'm going to try and be brief. I just really want to thank everybody for their teamwork when it comes to this. This wasn't easy. And certainly I remember from the very beginning and talking with Councilmember Navarro on the phone as we were discussing this outbreak in China and how, oh no, we need to do something and do something quickly. And we immediately as a council responded quickly and said, hey, we need to immediately reverse course in terms of where the county executive was and start being very fiscally conservative in terms of what it is that we need to do, as well as be mindful of the needs that are continuing to grow in our community. We've been incredibly responsive, and for all the criticism that we get and will continue to get, the reality is that this council has done amazing work. We essentially based our school system. We didn't rebase, but we based our school system. One of the largest school systems in the nation, not just here in this region, but in the nation. And, we said, hey, we're going to have to hold you to the same amount of money, that you normally get, maintenance of effort, and that's it. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a big deal in any year, but in a year in which we're facing a crisis, that's an even bigger decision. Same thing with Montgomery College. Same thing with a lot of our large departments who depend on us. I mean, this is something that we should not take lightly in terms of the ability of us to respond to this kind of pandemic. And so I just want to applaud each and every one of you for, again, your leadership, your intuitiveness in terms of knowing where we stand as a community, and responsiveness when it comes to answering the call of what true leaders are. And that is people who can rise to the top in occasions like this. And so we should all be proud. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. I just want to add my thanks here. I'm glad Andrew Friedson mentioned the municipalities issue. There is a process for the county to cost share with applications from FEMA that municipalities may make. I think there is an intent that grant funds for business that the county funds have to be available to all businesses in the county, not just the municipalities. So that particular one I'm not sure about, but generally speaking, PPE and those kind of emergency responses are very much intended. And of course, this will be a work in progress. Now, setting that aside, thank you. Appreciate everyone's great work. Council President Katz, thank you so much. This has been a challenging budget year, to be sure. One for the record books, or the history books anyway. And I think we've made some important steps forward. I feel that we're really positioned going into what is going to be, we're in a crisis, but the impacts have economically, budgetarily are still, it's a gathering storm. And I think we have battened down and braced this county as best as we can. Now we're going to need to work together as it arrives. So thank you to my colleagues for terrific work and a lot of very strong decisions, a lot of very strong leadership. I'm really pleased to have been part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to join the chorus. you know, I couldn't be more proud of each of you and certainly of our staff. And we're not finished. This is not an end. This is not an end of the budget speech, but we did work together, and this was a very difficult thing. The process might not have been pretty, but it's pretty remarkable that we've even gotten to this place at this time. We're going to have to go through the 7 items here to vote on them individually, but we really have stuck together with our public during times when no one ever experienced it to do it this way before. And we proved that we can do this, and we proved that we can come up with a budget, not the budget that we necessarily wanted, but we can come up with a budget that we can fulfill what is necessary to fulfill. So that becomes very, very important. So congratulations to all, especially all of our staffs who always work tirelessly, but certainly this time. And with that, I understand Mr. Madalino is on the call. Mr. Madalino, did you have any other comments? There was a question asked about the savings plan.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. And sorry to be joining you from my house today, but I was not on the call when that question came up. So if you could.
I'd be happy to repeat, Council President, if you'd like, or however you'd like to handle it.
Yeah, what? Please, Councilmember Green.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if the executive branch is planning to submit a savings plan. I know we've talked about it a lot in general, but concretely, are you working on a plan that you plan to submit to the council for FY?
We do, and what I've tried to say, we have the first chunk of federal money. With the 183, we have other dollars that are flowing in to the county government, to the outside agencies. Congressman Hoyer announced today that the state and local relief bill that the House intends to pass will be released this afternoon, and that they will have it passed by Friday through the House of Representatives. We're trying to balance what we know we have in the door, what we're going to get, how our revenues might change, and give you something that works for the fiscal year. And because those numbers are all still changing, while we can give you some outlines, the details are still to be worked out. And that's why I think from the first day that Councilmember Navarro talked about the continuity of services budget and talked about sort of FY21 being a completely different experience, and that there are going to be, I'm sure throughout the year, there are going to be supplementals, there are going to be savings plans. As we learn more about our revenues, as we learn more what's happening to the aid we get from the federal government, from the state government, from the changing plans that we have with how to spend that money, the FEMA reimbursements. So that's why I feel like you are, if you're not already tired of me, I'm sure you're going to be tired of the executive branch throughout the year on the budget, because it's going to be a constant back and forth.
Okay. So you're still deciding whether you need to save money in FY21 versus you'll have additional money that prevents the need for cuts. It's not, that's what I.
We are naturally saving money because of things that the executive is implemented. For example, we were, I think, the first jurisdiction in Maryland out with a hiring freeze and a procurement freeze on March 18th. So, we have been saving money naturally through that time. We don't need a legislative authorization to save money when the price of gasoline goes down, and you just have to spend less on gasoline that was budgeted. So we have those natural savings that are occurring, while we have some, other things, other costs that are going, that have gone much higher. I mean, who would have thought 4 months ago that office supplies would include face coverings and not copier paper. So we're able to make all of those adjustments within the spending authorization that you broadly gave to the county and to each county department last May when you passed the budget. So I don't think we don't need a savings plan in order, again, for FY20. We will happily update you as we, after we are constantly looking at how the spending is going. And certainly by the end of the fiscal year, we will explain to you what has happened with our spending and what's happened to our revenues and what's happened to our fees and fines and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I'll pass it back, but I'm concerned about a lack of clarity about a savings plan. It seems to me right now OMB should be asking immediately for every department to submit a savings plan, that the budget that we've passed is not predicated on any loss of revenue. We know there will be a loss of revenue. And so continuity of services was a way to get downfield, but we still have more to do. So I understand and I appreciate that the revenue side of the picture is just as cloudy as everything. But the sooner we begin to save money in the next budget, the less difficult the choices will be that we have to make. I think that's important for us.
And again, Councilmember Reamer, I was answering what I thought your question was for FY20, the current year, as opposed to FY21.
Well, I guess, theoretically you could do both, but I think the intention that we've been discussing as a body was the likelihood of a savings plan that would be an FY21 savings plan. Is that right, Marlene?
Yes, that's correct.
So we have proceeded on an assumption that as soon as we pass this budget, we will begin working on an additional budget, essentially a savings plan based budget. That is making additional changes to further reduce the spending in the year. That concept has been reiterated many times here in our council's deliberation process, but it's clear that the executive branch is not necessarily on the same page about submitting a savings plan for FY21, soon. And that's what we've been saying we were expecting we would all do. I understand that the revenue thing does jumble the pictures to some extent, but I think nevertheless we need to get clarity on this issue, or else we're going to be proceeding, without further putting savings measures in place, and then we'll have a much more difficult time towards the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Malema, for joining us. I have a visitor here. I think that how you explained it is appropriate. I mean, we all assume that we're going to have a savings plan, but we want to have a savings plan that is based on information as it's rapidly changing, and including revenue, including savings that we're already accruing potentially, as you discussed through other means, including a robust policy discussion about how much and what of our reserves we should use. I think there's a lot of factors. So I personally am heartened to hear that you're proceeding with due deliberation and caution in trying to look at the numbers, and you'll come back to us. Like you said, we're going to get tired of you. You're going to be coming back to us to present and represent. I think it would be a mistake to prematurely, based on theoretical guesses, to just put out something and cut services in a way that's significant at a time when people are struggling. So I think we need to take this in due course, base it on the revenues that we have, look what's happening at the federal level, our reimbursements, look at our reserve, look at the entire picture, and do it as we did. We were very efficient. We all just spent the last 45 minutes or so thanking our staff for how quickly they were able to turn around in collaboration with the executive staff, some of these continuity of services budgets. So we're going to be prepared to do what we need to do. But I just wanted to underscore that I think a deliberate approach is best. And I think from everything you've said and how you presented it, and because of what is unknown at this time, that's what we're doing. So you can comment on that if that's the case. I did want to ask directly, you do anticipate an FY21 savings plan. It's just based on more information. Is that a fair characterization of how you're proceeding, Mr. Madaleno?
Right. I mean, yes, you will see savings plans. You will see supplemental appropriations as a variety of, as we learn more about our revenues. We don't get our next distribution of state revenue, of the income tax that they collect on our behalf. We don't get that until after Memorial Day. So you have to adopt your budget before, on your current schedule, before we have those revenues. And I would remind you that with the distribution that we get at the end of May, it reflects income taxes in January, February, and March. So probably 10 of those 12 weeks would have been very normal. And only those last 2 weeks would have shown sort of the very beginning of the decline. We don't get April and May numbers until the end of June. So I believe the executive agrees with you, Councilmember Joando, that you want to be cautious about what you're putting on the table and taking off the table, and responding when we have better information, and that we will be in a stronger position in a few weeks than we are now, understanding the situation, and in 2 or 3 months we will be in an even better position.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Madaleno. I think that what you're saying, it's something that we've all, I think that we all understand, which is why we did proceed so quickly to work through this budget as a continuity of operations budget, and work so quickly to do so many things. I know that, the administration, for example, the finance department is trying to secure lines of credit. I mean, we need to cover all the bases. And the bottom line is that we also need to stand ready to act as things come up, because this particular crisis is so different from the recession. So I think that, overall, what we need to do is to continue to track everything and stand ready as much as possible to be able to address what in many ways it's an unknown. I think that there have been, some conversations about how there might be resources that are available, and then conversations about, the bottom is just going to fall out. I personally have been proceeding along with my colleagues from a perspective that we have got to position ourselves, we have to prepare, we have to be proactive. We've been down this road before, we've seen this movie before, a version of this movie before. So I think what we are doing here is what our residents and our constituents expect all of us to do, which is to retool really quickly and do everything possible to mitigate the impact. So I just wanted to mention that, because I do think that a lot of it is still quite, unknown, and that's okay. We will address it as it comes, just as we have proceeded thus far. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. We're going to go to, unless Marlene or Craig Howard have anything else in addition, I'm going to go through the potential additions one by one. Are you ready for that? Okay. So I'm looking at for the item 4 on page 3, for those of you who want to follow along. And there's 7 items on there. We're going to do it individually. The first one is it's a potential additions to tax-supported budgets. The first one is correction and rehabilitation, enhance cell vent bunk door to reduce self-harm. And that's for $234,000. Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
I move, Mr. President, that we would retain this funding.
It's been moved by Councilmember Jawando. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Albornoz. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Yes, that is unanimous. Okay, thank you. The next item that we have is the county attorney. It's for the outside counsel increase of $110,000. There's a footnote that says, note that the council only wanted to add this if staff believed it could be funded by the CARES Act funding. Staff believe this expenditure is likely to be eligible. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It's moved by Councilmember Navarro. Is there a second?
Second.
It was seconded by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously as well. Okay, the third item on the list is emergency management and homeland security, new security grants to faith-based organizations out of continuity of services budget, and that's for $700,000. Is there a motion? Councilmember Friedson made the motion. It is seconded by Councilmember Glass. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously as well. The fourth item is Health and Human Services, add 10 school health nurses for $887,761. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It was moved by Councilmember, who was the one who made the motion?
I think I did.
Councilmember Auburn. I never see you, Councilmember. Councilmember Albornoz, and seconded by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously, and that should carry even more unanimously than that. I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time. The next item, number 5, is Human Rights, the Investigator 2, for $75,116. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It was moved by Councilmember
Second.
Reamer, seconded by Councilmember Jawando. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously. The next item, item 6, is Housing Opportunities Commission, delete funds for rental licenses of $36,644. Is there a motion?
So moved.
It was
Second.
moved by Councilmember Reamer and seconded by Councilmember Friedson. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously. And the last item, item 7, is Recreation Senior Transportation Initiative of $180,000.
So moved.
It was moved by Councilmember Friedson, seconded by Councilmember Navarro. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that carries unanimously. So the entire package was passed unanimously by this body. Yes.
Mr. President, there is one that is a non-tax supported one that I just wanted to make sure that the council followed up on, the add 3 field inspectors for solid waste disposal.
And we need
Right below there, yeah.
Yes, I see that right underneath. So we also need a motion for that, you're saying?
Yes.
We do.
Yeah, Councilmember, Vice President Hucker?
So moved, Mr. President. This is the one that the DEP director promised would pay for itself in savings in disposal cost.
Yep.
External.
Vice President Hucker made the motion. Was there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Glass. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Councilmember, yeah, thank you very much. And now I'm hearing from Mr. Howard that we also need to do solid waste. Will you explain that to me, please?
Sorry, I was texting you about the same item that Marlene just talked about. So,
All right. So that was a late breaking news item. That was what we just did. Okay. Is there anything else that we need to do? Marlene or Craig Howard?
Yeah, I'll just finish by telling you what is happening over the next few days. You do have a session tomorrow, which you'll deal with a couple of minor issues, grants, also some of the charges. Then on the 14th, we will tidy up all these numbers for your official straw votes. So if there's anything that you think is missing, please let me know. We will make sure that it is added for final consideration on the 14th. After that, staff begins to write all the resolution, reconcile all the numbers with OMB, and you will come back on the 21st for your final vote.
Thank you.
That is all I have.
Thank you very much. This will be the shortest meeting so far that we've had on the budget. We are now adjourned. Thank you.